Hi, I'm Miss Haley with the Huntsville-Madison County Public Library, and today for my craft we're going to be doing a painting. And today what we are painting is a Corgi, I call it the Corgi Hearts painting, and it is a Corgi holding some heart balloons, and I do have my example of the first one I did. So this is what we are painting today. And to make this painting, I'll leave it over there for inspiration. To make this painting, you're going to need a lot of stuff. So you're going to need some paper towels to dry your paintbrushes off on. I've got 3 here. If you don't have paper towels, I know sometimes those can be in short supply right now. You can also just totally dry it off on your paper. That 100% works too. I've done that in some of my other videos. You need a cup of water for your paintbrushes. You're going to need scissors to cut out your template. We're using a template today, and that template we'll get to in a minute, but you're going to need some scissors to cut it out. You're going to need a pencil to trace your template. You're going to need some paintbrushes. I have a thick flat-headed paintbrush. I have a smaller, just normal sort of size paintbrush. This is what I like to paint with for most of my paintings. And I also have a very small-headed paintbrush, if you guys can see that. And this is for some of the finer line work. There are some details on this one that you really need to get in there pretty small lines for. And so I've got a smaller brush for that. You can totally do that, though, if you don't have one. You can do that with this larger brush. You just kind of get it wet and you mold it into a point with your fingers. And that can work, too. Just up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I always do, put my paintbrushes into my water. I like to have them wet. They need to be wet anytime they are not being used. So you'll also need your template, and you'll want to print it out and cut it out using those scissors. So you should have a Corgi and a little heart. You can totally freehand your own hearts if you want to, but I wanted my hearts to look cute in a certain shape, so I am using my template today. My template can be found on our website at go.hmcpl.org/letspaint. And we are going to link that into the description for this video as well so that you can have access to that. You're going to need a plate for your paints. That's going to be our paint palette. You're going to need an 8x10 canvas. And you're going to need a lot of paint. So you're going to need white. You don't have to have a huge thing of white. You don't need this much white. I just have a big one. I use white paint a lot. So you need some white paint. You need some black. We really only need a tiny bit of black today. We're not using a lot of that. You need honeysuckle pink. And I get these paints. These are apple barrel paints. I buy them at Walmart. You can get them through grocery store pickup. I have checked. So that's where I get mine. So honeysuckle pink, red apple, cameo pink, king's gold, antique white, and khaki. And now if you can't find khaki, that's okay. You could probably do this painting without khaki. And if you can't find king's gold, it's a really mustardy yellow sort of goldy color. If you're looking for something to match that. The pinks are kind of up to you. You could do pretty much whatever. Now the pink is going to be for the background, as you guys saw. Now you don't have to do pink if you don't want a pink background. You could also do a couple other colors, really any color you wanted. You just want to make sure it looks good with your balloons and doesn't like blend in with them. So some other colors that I really like for the backgrounds are lavender sachet and Key West, which is a really minty color. And those can really look good with backgrounds too. You could also do purple or blue balloons. You know, it's really up to you. This is your Corgi heart painting. It's not mine, so do you. So for your paint, I already made my paint palette. So this is what we're going to use today. This is my red apple. This is my honeysuckle pink, which I just dipped my finger in. That's wonderful. This is a mix of red apple and cameo pink. It's pretty much equal parts. It's just a little bit. You don't need a ton because that's really only for the balloon. It's just spread out on my palette a little bit here. A tiny, tiny little just dot of black really. Again, that's spread out, but I really just did one little tiny squirt. Some white paint. You need a decent amount of your cameo pink, and then you want to do a big swirl of the antique white through that. That's going to be for our background. The cameo pink is a little bubblegummy to me, and I wanted it to be a little paler and have some yellow undertones. So that's why I mixed it with some antique white. And then you want equal parts, which it doesn't look at here because they've moved. But this is equal parts King's Gold and antique white. So that's King's Gold and antique white. I did the exact same amount of each. So just do a big squirt of King's Gold and then a big squirt of antique white. And then I did a teeny tiny itty bitty little baby squirt of the khaki into that. And that's going to be our body color for our Corgi. So to start out, you are going to take your Corgi template, you're going to cut it out, and you're going to place him kind of in the bottom left corner of your canvas. And you're going to trace him using your pencil. Now I have already traced mine. I don't know if y'all can see that there, but you trace them with your pencil very, very lightly. You don't want huge dark marks. We're working with lighter colors and they will be harder to cover up if you have really borne down hard with your pencil there. So like I said, just lightly trace it. For the hearts, I usually trace the top one first, which sounds weird, but you trace the top one first, and you can pick whichever one to be your top one. Your middle one could be your right one. On mine, it's my left. If you want it to look exactly like mine, it'll be the one on your left, and trace that. And then you set your other heart there, and you trace it, and you just don't go over. You stop when you get to the lines of your first heart. You guys can see that. And then you do the same thing with the third one. You put it there, you trace around it, you stop when you get to the lines of your other heart so that you're not tracing over it. You don't want to have to erase. Erasing on canvas doesn't always work very well. It can be rough. So once you've traced your Corgi, you're going to want to draw in the details on your Corgi. So you give him a little bit of a nose. You can go ahead and give him a mouth if you want to, just to give you some direction. You're going to paint right over that mouth. Don't try to paint around it. Just paint over it. Just trust me. So if you do put it on there very, very lightly. You can put a little eye dot. Again, we're going to paint right on over that. But if you want it there just to give you some guidance, you can do that. The most important part is this line here. So you want your line to come up, take a little bit of a dip right here, come back down, and it ends at his belly before you get to his hind feet. And then you pick it up with the front hind foot and you take it up to his little booty. And that is his back fur color. And then this part will be the white fur color. And you can give him a little ear too if you want. So to start out with, I almost always, when I'm painting, start out with my background color. So I'm going to move this because I don't want to drip onto my painting. And I will, it's there, so I'm going to put this right here. So once you have traced your template and you've filled in the details on your Corgi, you can take your big brush, make sure it's wet. Don't start with a dry brush, guys. So get your brush wet. Now you are going to dry it off. You just want it damp. You don't want it soaking. You don't want it dripping. So dry it off with your paper towel. And we're going to go in with the cameo pink and antique white. So I'm going to mix those on my palette. I'm going to mix them inward. I don't want to mix out and make a huge circle of paint. I want to keep this paint so that I can use it as much as possible and I don't have to mix more. I really don't like to have to remix a background color. It's a little hard sometimes to get the same color if you're mixing. If you're not mixing, it doesn't much matter, but if you're mixing, you don't want to paint your palette. You want to paint your canvas, not your palette. So try to keep it in one go and don't paint your palette. So once you've got it mixed up, go ahead and go in. You're going to start painting your palette background. I'm going to go in right along the edge of my Corgi. If you go over the line a little bit, that's okay, so long as you can kind of tell where it was. And I like to come in, I like to put my brush down close to him and then sort of inch it a little closer to the Corgi, to that line. That way I'm not painting over it and I have a little bit more control of where I'm going with that. I like to paint my outlines first when I can. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's easier to do the other side or to do the rest of the painting first, but when I can, I like to do my outlines. And so again, if you guys can see what I'm doing, I'm going to set my thing here. I'm going to inch it close to that line, and then I'm going to carry it along the line there and down. That way I'm never sitting it directly on my line and getting a big glob of paint that might cover it up where I don't want it to be. The good thing about acrylics is that you can always just paint right over them. Once it's dry, it's really okay to paint right over it. If it's dark, it might take a couple colors to paint over it, but a couple layers, but it is super duper easy to paint over acrylics, which is why I like them. It's hard to, you can't really ruin a painting with acrylics. I mean, I'm sure you could if you tried, but it's harder to do. You can just paint right over it. So again, I'm just kind of inching along that edge. I do like to paint my edges. You don't have to. I'm using a panel canvas rather than a stretched canvas, and it is pre-painted white. If you, I don't even know if you can buy them not pre-painted white. I'm sure you can, but most of the ones you'd buy in the stores or like in a craft section, like at Walmart, are going to be pre-painted white. So I don't think you have to worry about that. But if it's not, paint it white and let it dry. So again, I'm going to start close to the line, inch my way down, and then carry it along the line. You guys don't have to switch hands to paint. I know I'm weird. That's a me thing. But I like to do it so you guys can see. So keep going until you've got, ooh, I definitely went over my outline there, but that's okay. I can kind of see where it is, so it'll be okay. You can see I'm changing the angle of my brush as I'm getting into these sort of smaller, more detailed areas so that I'm not covering them over. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing on my hearts. Painting around the edge of those guys. I am going to move this out. I don't want that to dry in a clump. I kind of had this huge clump of paint on my brush when I first started, so I just smeared it right there. I'm going to paint that out real quick. If you don't, acrylics dry fairly fast, so if you have something like that you don't want it to be that way, go ahead and move it out. You don't want to, you could easily have a big clump of acrylic dry on your canvas there, and that maybe wouldn't look too good. Again, just coming around. And I'm almost doing it in sections. Ooh, I definitely went over the edge there. That's okay. I can see it. If you can see the line, you're probably okay. Or if you can see where the line should be, even if you can't see the line, you're going to be fine. It's not super the end of the world. You know what a heart shape looks like, right, guys? You can always paint it again and paint over the part that you went over the line. So making sure I've got a lot on the edge of my brush, and so as I'm coming close, I'm getting this ridge of paint that I don't want. So that's why you guys see me come close and then brush out, and that is to brush out that ridge of paint so that we don't have really distinct paint marks. Now that's a style. A lot of, if you go like to a real museum where real art lives, not that my art's not real art, but fancy famous art, you'll see a lot of brush strokes on those paintings. Most of those are done in oils, and that's a look that you can go for. You can kind of do that with acrylics. I just usually don't. but you could if you wanted to. Little area with the hearts is a little hard to go in. You're probably going to paint over it a little bit there. So once you've got your edges, it's pretty easy to fill in. You just fill in all of the background of the canvas. You just paint it on there. If you find yourself getting brush marks, you can come in with sort of a loose mark and make sure you're going to the edge of the canvas. And that'll help you not have that end mark where you lift your brush. If you're finding that you're having a problem with that, that can really help. I'm just going to fill in. I like to make sure when I'm filling in, you don't want to glob the paint on. You don't want your your canvas to be just swimming in paint. That's wasteful, and it'll take forever and a day to dry. It really takes a long time for that to dry, and I'm just kind of smoothing some brush strokes out. But you also don't want to go so light that you can see the white of the canvas through it if you can help it. Sometimes paints are thinner or they're really pale and you just have to do a second coat, and you can always come in with a second coat of paint. But if I don't have to do that, I prefer not to. So keep that in mind. I'm painting the edge of my canvas now. I will lift it up so I don't glue it to my paper. I've done that. If you do that, if your painting is stuck down to your newspaper, it's okay. Just peel it off. It'll be fine. We'll be fine. Make sure you've covered your table, incidentally, you guys. You don't want to just do this on an uncovered table. You'll have you'll either be mad at yourself or you'll have some very mad parents. All right. I think I'm pretty well covered. I don't see, there's a little blank spot right there. So I like to look around once I think I've got it done. I like to look at it and make sure that I'm just pretty well covered and I don't have any patchy spots where the white's showing through. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. When I rinse my brush, you guys, I'm going to show you right here. I do not do it gently. I just kind of jab that thing down there. There are some brushes you probably don't want to do that with. You want to be more gentle, and I'm not killing it or anything, but I am squishing it down in there to get that paint off. And then dry it off and then put it back in. So I don't think I need that brush again. I am going to go in and do my Corgi now. Since I started with my Corgi outline, the paint around the Corgi is the most dry. I'm just going to lift this for a second and put it back down. I don't want it sealed to the paper. So I started with my Corgi outline, which means the Corgi outline is mostly dry at this point. You maybe can see that on the camera. And so I'm going to go in with my main Corgi color. Wrong brush. There we go. Again, I'm going to dry my brush off really, really well. You do not want a lot of water on your brush. You want it damp. And I'm going to sort of form it into more of a point. It's kind of split. You want it damp, but you don't want it dripping wet, because if you get it dripping wet, you're going to stick it in your paint and you're going to water your paint down, and that's going to be lame. So I'm going to mix together my body color. And again, that was equal parts King's Gold and Antique White with just a smidge of khaki in there to dull it down a little bit. So I'm going to mix. You want to make sure you mix this good. You don't want swirls of that King's Gold in there or swirls of the white. You want a pretty uniform color for your Corgi's back. So make sure you're really thoroughly mixing it. When I'm mixing a background color, I don't care about that. I kind of like a swirly background. I mix this one really well, apparently, but I don't worry about that so much when I'm mixing a background color, unless I just want it solid. But for this, you want it solid, so make sure you mix it good. So this is the color you're going for. If your color is like really darker yellow, add a little bit more Antique White. If it's crazy, crazy pale, add a little bit more King's Gold and just tweak it until you get there. I don't recommend adding more khaki. You can get a really murky color if you do that. All right, so I'm gonna get a little off my brush. So the part we're painting is our Corgi's back. Let me bring my painting back. So we're painting this part. So we want to make sure we don't paint down here or up there, any weird places, okay? So that's what we're painting. I'm going to start with his back because I've mixed my paint. If you've just mixed your paint, you probably have a glob of it kind of on your brush. So I'm going to start in the middle just so I don't accidentally get a huge glob of it somewhere. And I'm going to work my way to that edge the same way I would do a background. I'm going to go along the edge. Now your Corgi, because we are painting lighter colors, you may need a double coat on your Corgi. And that's another good reason to start with your Corgi, is so that you can move on to other things and then come back to him and recoat. I'm getting a pretty thorough coat on him though, so you might not for this color. It's probably the white body color that is going to give us some trouble. But maybe not. It is white canvas. It may not be a problem. The important part is your pencil marks are covered. I recommend when you're painting your Corgi's back to go over those pencil marks a smidge with this lighter color. So I'm going not just up to the line down here where his leg is going to be white. I didn't just go up to the line and leave the line. I went a little bit over it so that that line is actually covered. And the same thing over here. I don't want that line showing up. And the white is really going to struggle to cover up that line. Those are the one spots probably where you're going to need double coats. Just going to go ahead and go on over it. I'm going to smooth him out. He's got some globs. Just very gently going over that. You don't want to lift. The danger of going back over an area that's painted and slightly dry is that you can lift the paint and then you'll get patches rather than just recovering it. So just be careful when you're doing that and have a light hand. So I'm not, normally I would paint just right up and over that, but because his inner ear is going to be sort of white, I'm going to put a smidge of pink in there too, but it's mostly going to be white. I am actually going to go around his ear, which is easier said than done. This is a detail part. This might be a part where you switch to your detail brush if you have one. I'm just using the point of my brush. I shaped it into a point. That's what you saw me doing when I picked this brush up. So that's pretty okay. Now that is going to need a second coat. I can definitely, I don't know if you guys can. Let me see if I can lift it. See, it's sticking. You guys can see there, you can see the lines of his ear showing up. So I will probably go back in with another coat of that once this is dry. I might give his whole body another coat. We'll see. And I'm just going to paint right over that eye that I put on there. I know about where it needs to be. And I will honestly be able to see a little bit of it through. And that's okay in this case because I'm going to paint that black. But okay. So don't forget his other ear. It's really easy to get to this point and be like, done! But you need this little ear here to be painted as well. So don't forget that guy. And give him a little coat as well. And again, this would be a part where it'd be fine to bring in your detail brush if you felt like you needed to. I'm doing pretty good with just the point. So that is my Corgi's body. I think it's dry enough down here already that I'm just going to go ahead and, before I rinse my brush off, and go in with a second coat right there. It's dry enough that I can do that. If yours is not, if it's really globby there, you may not need a second coat. But if it's not dry enough there, just don't worry about it. Come back later. You don't have to do it at the same time I am. Okay. And I'm going to come back in. That's already dry too because that was a really thin coat I did on his ear. I'm going to just go ahead and come back in to his ear and paint over that one more time just to cover up those pencil marks. And you guys saw how very, very faint my tracing was with my pencil marks. It was very, very light. And even with that super light hand, I still need 2 coats to really cover the pencil marks. So just keep that in mind. You don't need to like mark it heavy when you're tracing. You just don't need to do that. Okay, so I want this to dry. We're going to come in with white right here in a second, but not yet because the edge is not dry, and then I could just wind up with this smear between the two, and I want a strong line between the two. So we're actually going to come in and do his back hind feet. So if you guys can see that, and actually I didn't put this on there, but you need a tiny dot of antique white for this. So I'm just going to put a tiny little dot of antique white on my paint palette. There it is. And I'm going to come in just with my regular brush that I just rinsed off. Dry it off really good. Shape it a little bit. This brush has seen better days, you guys. And I'm going to get a little of that white, and we're painting his back legs. So his back legs, you guys, are, you can see this one here, not this one, and this little smidge right here, not there, right there. We're just going to paint that with antique white. That's just going to give it a little distinction from the front leg. Otherwise, we just have this big white chunk right there rather than 2 paws. You might want your detail brush for this, you guys. I don't feel like I did a good job just now. I'm going to do 2 coats because I want to cover up the pencil marks. I would almost definitely use, don't do what I'm doing, you guys. Use your detail brush if you have one for this leg. This leg's a little harder, but we're going to be okay. There we go. Okay. Rinse my brush off. Okay. We're going to do our hearts now. I'm going to do this heart, and we'll leave that one for last. So on my original, I had this heart in the dark red, and I went that way. And I think I'm probably just going to do that again. So I'm going to paint this heart apple red, which is the darkest of those red colors. Get some red on there. And I'm going to come in. Now, sometimes my apple red color, when I get it, this one's fairly thick. But sometimes you can see the white through it and it needs another coat. We'll see how this one does. We'll see if it needs it. You might also like that. I left my balloons a little bit translucent on my original painting. You can see a little bit of the white through. It's not a solid coat. And I did that on purpose because I thought it looked kind of cool because balloons are not always solid. Sometimes they're a little see-through. So I thought that kind of looked balloony. But it is up to you. If you want it to be a super solid color, just go back over it with a second coat once it's dry. But definitely wait for it to be dry. I'm a little shaky today. That doesn't help. So there's one coat of my red balloon. Smoothing it out a little bit. I don't want a lot of brush marks. Now, if your background is dry around your balloon points, You can go ahead and go in with your detail brush. Definitely use the detail brush for this if you have one. And do just a little triangle right there for our balloon end. Mine is dry enough that I can do this. If yours is not though, wait, because you'll just smear it into your background and it'll look kind of meh. But just a little triangle right there. I'm going to put my brush back, switch back to my big brush. I'm rinsing them off really thoroughly between colors. That's important that you get all that color off. Don't forget to rinse. You don't want to just go from color to color without rinsing your brush between. Otherwise, you're going to get brown. You're going to get this wonky color. So this one is that mix of Cameo pink and red, where I took the equal parts of apple red and Cameo pink. I'm going to mix them together on my palette. Pull this up to where you guys can see. And again, I'm mixing in. For this, if you like that swirly look, you could just do like sort of a bad job on mixing it. Not mix it as thoroughly. And that's okay. But I want mine to be one solid color, so I'm going to mix it pretty good. I haven't done any swirly colors anywhere else on this painting, so we'll stick to a nice solid. So there we go. That's our lighter shade. And you can see because I mixed, I have a really big glob of paint. I'm just going to roll it a little bit right there to get some of that off. And then I'm going to come in the middle of my heart so that I don't get a glob. And then I'm going to come right up to the edge. Just move along that edge. I'm doing that edge first, the one that borders this, so that hopefully it will dry quicker so that I can get to that heart balloon sooner rather than later. I'm going to paint my edge. Sorry, I'm focused, you guys. I got really quiet. Keep painting right along your edge. You can go over a little bit, as long as you keep the heart shape. If you go over a smidge, it's not going to hurt anybody. Just round it out into that heart shape. If you do, it will be okay. All right, and again, I think it's dry enough that I can go in with my little brush. Dry it off really good. Don't get excited and just grab it and go. Dip it into a little bit of that mixed paint and make just a very small little triangle right at the base. Okay, so while those dry, because I want them to be dry before I do this middle heart, since we're going to be touching up against the edge, we don't want to smear them together and mix them. I'm going to go in now on my Corgi's body that is white. Oops, that's not quite rinsed. Rinse that better. I actually wound up only using one paper towel for this one. I didn't rinse nearly as much as I sometimes have to. So we're going to paint this guy white. If your edges are not dry, this is the point where you're just going to have to wait a little bit. But my edges are pretty dry, so I think we'll be okay. And I'm just going to go in. This is just regular white, not the antique or anything. And we're going to go, we'll start with his hind leg here. We're going to go right on over. And there we go. If you go over your lines a little bit, it's okay. Just make sure you keep a clean line so that it's not like this weird little chunk into the other area. You just want to smooth it out if you do that. It's okay. Alright, so there we go. I don't think that's going to need a second coat, actually. It's covered the pencil marks really well. I don't see any patchiness. It's a close enough white to the background that there's not a patchiness between the two, so I think we're going to be okay on that. Now my ear, I think that was the last thing I painted the second coat on. It's still kind of wet, so I'm going to save that for the last, and I'm just going to come in to this part of the body. And I went over the line a little bit with the yellow, so I'm going to go over it a little bit with a white to counterbalance that. Just be careful if you have to do that, that you are dry on your yellow. You don't want to get any color mixing going on. Same thing right there. And I'm going to paint right over his little nose and right over his little mouth because A, those will probably show through and I'll be able to see them where I can put the black, and it's just, it's so hard to paint around something like that. You really can't. Don't try. Don't torture yourself, you guys. There's no need for that. So I will probably add a little bit of an extra coat down here. There was a little pencil mark that the pink hadn't covered. So I'll want to come back over that with a little bit more white, just so the pencil's not showing through. And we're getting his little paw. Smooth over that a little bit. I've got some brush marks come up into his face. Like I said, I'm going to paint right up and over his smiley face and his nose. That'll also help cover some of the pencil marks later. Just having that extra coat right there. So I'm getting some just on the tip, and I'm going to come into his little head stripe here a little bit. You could use your detail brush here. I'm choosing, perhaps wrongly, to use my slightly bigger brush. I think it worked out for me. I've just got it on just the very tip. There wasn't much left on my brush, and so I just got it on the very tip to do that. So now I'm going to go into his ear. And on this, I'm actually going to do a little more paint than I normally put down. Because A, I don't have to worry about it drying so that I can paint anything else. And B, I want a little glob here. I don't want it like standing out, but I want it a little globbier because A, Corgi has fuzzy little cute ears, and B, I'm going to go in with a smidgen of pink. So I'm going to dry my brush off, switch colors, and get a little bit, tiny smidgen, just the tiny smidgen of the cameo pink we painted the background. Just the littlest bit. You can see I'm just barely dipping my brush into it and picking up just the tiniest amount of pink. And I'm going to go in straight down. I'm going to dab it into the center part of his ear. I'm going to leave a white rim. Just dab that into the center of his ear. And that gets you that slight, light, little pink look of the inner ear for the dog. And that'll dry. I might go over it even with a dab of white just to make it even less pronounced. And just really faint. Just a tiny bit. It also gives a little texture when you go in like that because your brush gets a little spiky. You guys can see spiky brush. So it gives it a little texture because the inner ear of a dog is kind of floofy. So we're going to go and do our last balloon. Rinse my brush really well. Wipe it down. And this is the honeysuckle pink color, so the one color we haven't used yet, that medium color. We're going to go and around. I'm going to start with the red edge because that should be my driest edge, but don't just assume that it will be. Give it look at it. Make sure that it is in fact, don't take my word for it, make sure that it is in fact your driest edge. Use your eyes. This would also be the point where you'd look at your balloons and see if you need another coat. If you think you do, you would do that next. I do not think my balloons are going to need another coat. I think they're good how they are. I'm pretty happy with their color and their solidity. So I think I'm good on that. All right, so there's that. I have this weird little two little white dots right there that I'm going to go in with some pink and fill. Make sure my brush is super clean though, because I was using a much darker color that would show up really badly if I got it right there. So I'm just going to go in and patch that. Just smooth it out. It'll blend in when it's done if you smooth it really good. Don't know why there were two little white dots there. So now I'm going to go in with my detail brush, my small, teeny tiny brush. I'm going to give the little triangle right here. And rinse off. Whoops. Drop my brush. So my Corgi, my Corgi face is still pretty wet. So I don't think I want to paint him just yet. But even though that guy's still wet and that guy's still a little wet, I think they're dry enough that I can do my little highlight mark. So I'm going to get some white on my brush. And I'm just going to make the mark. It's just one quick movement, a little thicker at the top than it is at the bottom. But just bloop. Well, that one's thicker at the bottom than the top, but whatever. Boop. And so there's that. His nose is a little bit more dry now. We are going to Alright, so now that my body is dry, I'm going to go in with the black. So again, the little detail brush, slightly damp. I'm going to re-damp mine because I need to form it a little pointier there. There we go. And I'm just going to get the tiniest bit of black on my brush. Just kind of dipping my brush in so that I have just a little black on the tip. Nothing crazy. And that's dry enough. If your background's dry enough so that you can rest your hand, that can be really helpful so that you can kind of steady yourself. But I'm going to just go in and draw his little mouth. I can actually see the line I had drawn. So I'm going right in over that. My brush is trying to separate. I'm just going to trim that off. I'm going to use my scissors, guys, and trim this brush real quick, because that is going to be very problematic. If you have a stray hair on your brush like that, it can, when you're doing fine line work like this, it can really mess you up. Alright, so like that. Then I'm going to do his nose. Dogs have the best noses, you guys. I don't know if you know that. You've seen a dog's nose up close. They're pretty cute. We're going to do his little eye. And I gave my last painting this big, almost anime, sort of cartoony eye. This guy, I'm going to give him just a little round eye. You can do whatever kind of eye you guys really want. That's up to you. So we have 3 balloons. So he's going to have 3 strings coming out of his mouth. So we're just going to go whoop, whoop, and loop, like that. Now, they're really patchy here. So I'm going to go back over that now that I have an idea of where those are going, so that they're not weirdly patchy. A string would not look like that in real life, so we don't want Don't want it super patchy right there. And then we're going to draw 3 strings just down to the top of his mouth, not through it. Don't go through it. But I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to go right about here. And I'll come back in, like I said. You can see how patchy that is right there. Let me pull it a little closer so you guys can really see what I'm talking about. You can see that pink coming through it. We'll just go back over that now that we know where their line is. That will be super easy. And it might be a moot point if this one comes through it. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to cross and come down. And again, definitely going back over that one. And then we're going to come here and up to this guy. Right along that line. So now I'm going to go back over that to make it a thicker, more solid looking line. Maybe didn't have quite enough paint on my brush when I did it the first time. If you guys are resting your hand on your canvas, just really make sure that it's dry. Otherwise, you're going to have a handprint. You're going to lift some of your paint off and have a handprint right there, and you don't want that. You can always paint over it, though, if you did. No big deal. Okay. So I have one more detail to add to his face, and I see some more pink right here that's a little patchy. So I'm going to switch really quick to my slightly bigger brush. It's always good once your background is dry to give it another look, because there might be some patchy places that you just couldn't see because it was shiny before. So like right here, I have this weird white patch. Just make sure you smooth that out really good. There's something in it too. So there. And then the very last detail that I'm going to add to my Corgi is his little eyebrow. I think this spot just needs a little bit more definition. You do not have to do this. It's up to you. I'm going to go in with a little antique white. I think I used regular white when I did this on my original. But I think I'm going to use some antique white on this one. I just want to see what that looks like. We're just going to give him a little eyebrow ridge. Just for some flavor. Like that. And you now have a complete Corgi Hearts painting. Thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you had fun.